Well, I told you that this wasn't a very busy day for me. So I was going to be here and I might make a few of these. I'm going to make at least one more. And I'm going to I'm going to say this. I've been all over Christians and I've made, well, you know how I feel about Christianity and the deception that Christians are under. But I'm going to say this because I've told you, read the Bible characters and see how their lives progress. So I'm only going to use two today. I could use countless numbers, but I may use three. I don't know. First off, well, I may use three. Let's go to Abraham. And I shared with you in one video about the unilateral covenant that God made with Abraham. But Abraham was given the promise by God that Abraham would be the father of many nations, that his children, his descendants would be as numerous as the stars in the sky or the sand on the beach. But understand, God gave him that information. And this is, when you read the Bible characters, this is how God does it. There's a certain amount of information given. And then people, we start adding our own thoughts and insights into that information on how it's going to work out. But let's just see how it works out. Abraham was told that he was going to be the father of many nations. And 12 years after that, it still hasn't happened. And so, maybe God needs some help here. I know that this is what God wants because that's what he said, but maybe he needs some help. And so, with advice from his wife, they decide to do what the world does. Well, I've got this handmaiden here, and since I'm barren, you take her, and the baby that we get from that, we'll call our baby. And that's what happens. And Ishmael is born. And then at some point, 14 years later, God tells him that he's going to have a son. And Abraham says, oh, if you could just bless Ishmael. And God says, oh, I'm going to bless Ishmael, but he's not the child of promise that I told you about before. And, over the years, there'd been some laughter. And even at this point, there's some laughter from Sarah that this is just not possible because Abraham's 100, she's 90. It's not possible. But the premise or the point of the story I'm making to you right here is that sometimes we think we need to add something or do something because God intends for such and such to happen. Okay? And our attempt to do something is never the right move. Let me back up. It's in the plan of God, but it's not going to accomplish what you think it's going to accomplish. Because God is going to accomplish what he intends without your help. Now let's go to Moses. Moses, according to Acts chapter 7, when Stephen is telling the story, Moses knows he's the deliverer. And so when he fights and kills the Egyptian who is fighting with the Israelite, he thinks that the Israelites are going to recognize that he's the deliverer and he'll be able to lead them out. Well, that leads him to the wilderness. And then in that 40 years in the wilderness, he meets God. And now after the time of that period where he's with God and God is showing him things, now God tells him to go back to Egypt, and Moses doesn't even think he can do it with God's help. So he went from thinking he could do it without God to now thinking that he can't do it even with God's help. There's the lesson. Because when God enters your life, really enters your life, you come to realize your weakness, your inability, as well as his strength and his sufficiency. But you're not looking at yourself thinking, oh, I can do this. You're not part of the believe movement. We'll talk about that at some point in time in the future. But you're not part of that. Joseph, he told his brothers the dream because he knew from the dream that he was going to have some special things happen in his life. So he tells his family the dream where they all bow down to him. He has no idea what is going to happen, and he feels comfortable enough, maybe confident enough, to tell them of the dream. So what happens? Yeah, his brothers are jealous. They don't like him very much. They pretend he's dead, and they sell him into slavery. He ends up in Egypt. Side point. Very important for you to understand Genesis 50:20. Because at the end, when Joseph is talking to his brothers, and he says, what you meant for evil, God intended for good. Genesis 50:20. Now understand, there's only one thing that happened. Joseph was sold into slavery. His brothers meant it for evil. This is not that Romans 8:28 where God made it good. This is God meant that for good. One thing happened. That's the side point. But anyway, he's there for at least 13 years, probably closer to 17. But in any event, whether it's 13 or not, when Pharaoh comes and asks him to interpret his dream, he doesn't think he can do it. He says, well, the God I serve can do it. And I say these things because these people, the biblical characters, they are Christianity. Well, wait a second. There before is Christianity. When they think there's something special and they think they can do something, they're Christianity. That's Christianity 100%. They think they can do something. But as time goes on, they find that not only can they not do anything, they didn't know God. Because now, during this period of time, they get to know God and they realize that they really can't do anything. Christians are in the before picture of that, where they still think they can do something and they just don't know God, and God has not invaded their life yet. So they are, as I've said, I may not have said it in a video, but I've written it in many things that I've written. They're unbelievers. They are religious unbelievers. There are two types of unbelievers in the world. There are the secular, worldly unbelievers, and there are the religious unbelievers. They are the religious unbelievers because they are the before picture. They're Moses in Egypt the first time, thinking they can do something and that maybe God needs their help. Abraham, maybe God needs his help, because he certainly didn't understand when God told him that he was going to have a child and be the father of many nations. He didn't understand it was going to be 27 years. Joseph, when he told the story the vision to his brothers, the dream to his brothers, whatever, and his family, he didn't realize what was ahead. Again, you become understanding of God more when he has brought you low. Which, again, if you're going to realize that who God is and that he does things for you. You don't do things for him. So, read the Bible characters. See what their lives are like and how they change after God invades their life. I love you all.